Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another holiday card. I've got a clean and simple card today. I'm going to be using some extra stars from another card. If you remember, I used this My Favorite Things Dynamics Blueprints 18 star on my holiday card a couple weeks ago. So there was an extra piece to this star in the thin layer that I didn't use, so I'm going to use a bunch of those extra ones for the card today. And I'm also using this Mama Elephant Basic Borders, the strip right here on the right. I think this stamp set's going to be really great for a lot of different cards. I'm also using the Merry and Bright die set by Ellen Hudson. I've already die cut the Merry and Bright sentiment out of some black cardstock. I'm going to be using some Ranger watercolor paper. Here's the packaging. The Ranger watercolor paper is very, very white, which is why I'm using it on this card. I don't like it as much as the Strathmore because I feel like it pills up just a little bit more, but I just love the bright white color. Anyway, so I'm going to be taking my stars, and I'm using a piece of scratch paper, and I'm adhering them down using just a little bit of adhesive. And this is going to help me heat emboss them without having to get my fingers on them or touch them or anything. So I can just go ahead and apply my Versamark ink. And then I'll sprinkle some black sparkle embossing powder by Ranger, and I'll heat it to set it. And so this sparkle is kind of like an iridescent sparkle on top of black embossing powder. So it's a really nice clean look. Now once that kind of cools for a second, I'm going to take my paper piercer and I just put it right underneath where the little bit of adhesive was that I used, and I just pop it and it pops right off. So I'm going to do this to all of my stars. And now I'm going to take these stars and I'm going to arrange them kind of from bottom to top. And I'm going to alternate kind of the direction of each of the stars, so I don't want it to be even. I want it to be sort of random. And those of you who know me know that it's going to take me a really long time to perfect this, to figure out exactly where I want these stars. So I kind of skipped all of that thought process. And I'm going to use a two-way glue pen to make sure that I get glue on all sides of this star, because I'm going to be putting water in the middle, and I ended up using Tombow Mono Multi-Glue the first time I created this card. And I just sort of dotted it here and there and then put it on the cardstock, but when I did the watercolor inside the star, it leaked out. So I found that this two-way glue pen was perfect, and I got really good adhesive all over the star. It didn't leak out and it really stuck. You'll see I'm also using these EK Success Tool tweezers, and they're awesome tweezers because when you pick something up, it doesn't bend the paper or you know, kind of crease it or anything. They're really great. So anyway, once I've got all my stars aligned, I'm going to take some distress markers, and I'm going to do this 3 markers at a time. The first ones I'm using are Pine Needles, Mowed Lawn, and Squeezed Lemonade, so I'm just going to apply some of that to my craft mat. And this is an important step. I'm taking an aqua painter and I'm going to wet my cardstock inside the star, so it's already primed and ready to receive the color. So then I'm going to wipe my brush off a little bit because I don't want too much water on it, since I've already got enough water on my cardstock. And I'm going to pull up some of the pine needles and I'm going to lay it down. You can see it sort of spread out because I've already got water on my cardstock. Now if you want to have a very bright, vibrant look, then you can use less water, or you could just continue to add more and more ink. So I'm going to go kind of part way up the star here, and I'm using this rainbow pattern, so I've got it in the order of the rainbow. And I'm going to wipe off my brush with a tissue here, and I'm going to start pulling up the next color, which is Mowed Lawn. And I'm just going to kind of dab it on the border between those two colors so that they'll blend, and then I'll pull my color upward. And because I've already got water, it's much easier to get a nice even look on your cardstock. So now I'm starting on the next star, and I'm going to wet the star again first. And then notice that I'm not doing a different color on each star, because I want it to look more like a rainbow behind the stars. So I'm going to put some of that Mowed Lawn in the next star, and then I'll move into my Squeezed Lemonade. And I'll blend that all together. And I'm using just from red to green, so I'm not using any purples or blues because I wanted to keep this pretty Christmassy. So now I'm going to use my next 3. Just put some on my craft mat, which is a Ranger craft mat, by the way. And I'm speeding this up a little bit so you could just watch me color quickly. This is Spiced Marmalade, and then the next color is going to be Ripe Persimmon. And I was trying to keep track and do it from top to bottom so I wouldn't mix up, because all the colors look the same once you lay them on the craft mat. And then after Ripe Persimmon is Picked Raspberry. And then finally I'll use some Barn Door and Fired Brick. And I kind of have my stars hanging off the edge so it looks like they continue on even though the card ends. And I'll let that dry, and now I'm going to take my Merry and Bright and I'm going to lay them down on my cardstock here to figure out where I want them to go. And the first version of this card I made, I put the sentiment all the way at the bottom, and I felt like it just left too much space at the top, so I moved it up a little bit and I have it hanging off the edge there. So I decided to use my 2A glue pen again because it works so well with the stars. And so I'm just going to make sure that I get the whole thing covered, and then I'll use my tweezers again to place it just right on the cardstock. Now I'm going to do that with all 3 pieces, and then I'll trim off that excess from the back. Alright, now I'm going to actually stamp directly onto my card base. So I want to line this up to make sure it's straight. So I took my acrylic block, and because it has a straight edge, I kind of placed it right there against the edge, and then I picked up my block and adhered it. And that way I make sure that I get my stamp exactly straight across. This is some VersaFine Black Onyx ink, some pigment ink. And this is my favorite ink for clear stamps because I always get good coverage. So I'm going to stamp this, and you'll notice as I was figuring out where to stamp it, I accidentally got a little bit too close to the cardstock and I stamped it. So I know you guys like to see my mistakes. This is my mistake, so I figured, you know what, it really was a small area, so I'm just going to flip it over and pretend like that didn't happen. Because who's going to look at the back anyway? And even if they do, they'll say, oh, she messed up, or oh, this is a homemade card. So anyway, not a big deal. So I got that lined up on the edge, and the reason why I put this border on the left is because I wanted to balance out my Merry and Bright sentiment with something else. And so anyway, that's kind of my thinking. So I've got some dimensional adhesive here that I'm going to use to pop this up just a little bit. And of course it wasn't perfect, so I had to pull it up and put it back down. And usually if you pull it up right after you put it down, it comes off pretty easily. So I decided I wanted something just a little extra, so I took some of these Stampin' Up! Rhinestones and I colored them with a 110 Copic marker, it's just black, and I adhered them to the cardstock, and then I decided, you know, it's just too much black and I didn't really like it, so I took them off and I just ended up putting some clear ones on there, and I thought it looked much better. So anyway, so that's what I ended up doing. And that's pretty much the end of the card. It's kind of sparkly, but not too sparkly, I think, because my sentiment is matte. So I just have that sparkle around the edges of the stars. You could actually use a Wink of Stella pen and color on top of the stars on the watercolor there, but I decided to just leave it as is. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week. Thanks for watching.